Today's video is going to be a little bit different because it wasn't really that long ago that we looked at Volkswagen's GTI. And today we're taking a look at the Golf R, the pinnacle of the Golf lineup in America. The GTI may have been one of the original hot hatches in the world, but the Golf R is probably one of the pinnacles of hot hatch refinement. Under this hood we have a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine producing 292 horsepower, and we have all-wheel drive, which is an important differentiator between this and the GTI. The GTI is down there around 220 horsepower, this is nearly 300. The GTI is front-wheel drive, this is all-wheel drive. Giving the plot away a little bit in this video right away, I have to say that if I were shopping for a compact hatchback, I would take the Golf R over the Honda Civic Type R and the Subaru WRX. Let's talk about why. The first thing you'll notice about the Golf R is the overall conservative design. Even the name Golf R is a little bit on the conservative side compared to WRX, STI, Type RA, Honda Civic Hatchback Type R, etc. The name is demure, the front end is demure, some might even call it boring, but I actually like the overall simplistic look. The conservative design theme is especially noticeable when you look at the Golf R in profile, because this doesn't have an enormous wing on the back like we find on some models of the STI, and it doesn't have that overall more interesting design that we see in the Honda Civic Type R. Instead, we get a relatively discreet little spoiler right here on top of the hatch. We get some very minor aero treatments at the bottom, on the back, and on the front. But overall, at first glance, it would be hard to determine the difference between this and the GTI, and that's just the way that Golf shoppers seem to like it. Out back, things are perhaps a little bit less discreet with these quad exhaust tips at the bottom, but overall everything continues that restrained design language that we see on the side and up front. Even the camera is hidden away right there under that Volkswagen logo. Under the hood, we find that 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that I mentioned earlier, again producing 292 horsepower. What separates this from the competition is that this is available with a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. And of course, depending on what you want to compare this to, we also have all-wheel drive standard. We don't have all-wheel drive in the Civic Type R. I know it's sacrilege to say this, but I would get my Golf R with that 7-speed dual clutch because it's going to be faster 0 to 60 when you're really trying hard and faster 0 to 60 when you're not trying hard. If you're a professional manual transmission driver, then you might be able to get this 0 to 60 about as fast as the Golf R with the DCT, but for most of us, we're going to be faster every time with the DCT. It's going to be a little bit easier to live with as well. That's the one thing that I dislike about the Honda Civic Type R, is that there's no dual clutch transmission available in that vehicle. Again, I know it's sacrilege, but for everyday driving in stop-and-go traffic, I would take the dual clutch transmission car. And a vehicle like this is designed to be driven every day. If it was a fun weekend car, or if I was buying one as a second car, then yes, I would get the manual over the dual clutch automatic. But if I were driving this every day as my only car, I'd take the DCT. Unlike some performance hatches, we actually have a power seat over here for the driver with a 2-way adjustable lumbar support. Overall, I found this seat to be easily the most comfortable in this category. We also have a tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion, making it easier for shorter or taller drivers to find an ideal driving position. And the passenger seat, although it doesn't have the same range of motion as the driver's seat, it is a partial power model. So the recline is powered, whereas the rest of it is a manual design. I really like the reserved and restrained styling that we see in here a little bit more than what we see in the Civic Type R and some of the competition. This reminds me a little bit more of modern Audis, especially the full LCD instrument cluster, which we see in this vehicle and in some modern Audis, although the software is a little bit different in here than in something like an Audi A4 or A5. Although the Golf R is a little bit smaller than some of its competitors, we have a very generous rear passenger area because of the squareness of the Golf. And that's why if I sit upright, I have about 2 inches of headroom left and a reasonable amount of legroom back here. Because of its overall size, you will find a little bit more room in the Type R's cargo area than in the Golf's. But the overall shape of this cargo area is, I think, a little bit more practical because of the squareness that we find back here. Let's get our numbers out of the way first. We ran from 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds in this Golf R. That's about what most people are getting out of this with the manual transmission. You will go 0 to 60 faster if you get the 7-speed dual clutch transmission because it can shift faster than you or I can. In our 60-0 braking test, this stopped in a very impressive 103 feet, even though this is a little on the heavy side compared to something like the Honda Civic Type R. Now, I won't mince words. Personally, I find the Civic Type R to be more fun out on the road. We get more power, it's a little bit crazy, it handles actually better than the Golf R. Part of that has to do with the light curb weight, the tire size, etc. But it also has to do with the overall design of that Civic Type R. It is just an absolute hoot to drive. It's very, very engaging. The trouble with the Type R is in the creature comforts, I think. Because this seat is a little bit more comfortable, the overall nature of this vehicle is a little bit more grown up. I like the suspension tuning for this as far as a daily driver goes, and I like this manual transmission just a little bit more than what we see in the Type R. But again, I really have to say that if I were shopping for one, I would get the 7-speed dual clutch, and for me, that's one of the big differences between this and that Honda Civic Type R. If Honda found a way to take the 8-speed dual clutch transmission from the TLX and the ILX, which is quite simply the best dual clutch I've ever driven, and put it under the hood of the Type R, then I would take it over the Golf R. But in terms of overall driving nature out on the road, I like the way that this vehicle is tuned. Out on our gravel test road, the nature of the Golf R is definitely still sporty. We can feel all the minor imperfections on this particular road surface. Although I do appreciate the dynamic suspension that we have in this car, because you can soften things up a little bit. And this is not kidney jarring or bone crushing like we see in some ultra sporty compact vehicles out on the market. I have complained about ultra-firm suspensions in other performance small vehicles out on the market, but we don't see that same problem in the Golf R. Now, if you would like this to be rock hard, we can put this in the race mode, and then it definitely firms things up, and we feel even more of the imperfections out here on this road surface. Definitely don't use race mode if you're going over speed bumps quickly. In addition to the 3 basic pre-programmed modes, we also have an eco mode that helps you save fuel if you want to do that sort of thing in your Golf R, and we have a custom mode which allows you to adjust a surprising number of settings. Now, unfortunately, we can't do that while we're driving, so I do have to stop and take a look at this menu right here. We can adjust the suspension, the steering, the drive system, the adaptive cruise control, the adaptive front lighting system, the climate control, and the engine sound, all here from this menu. So for instance, if I want the racing engine sound, but I would like my adaptive lighting system to be in eco mode and my climate control to be in normal, and I would like my suspension to be in comfort, well, the steering is definitely in race, then I can do that with that custom mode right there. It allows us a lot more customization than we find in the competition. I know that Alex and Autos is a very pragmatic channel. We talk a lot about value, we talk a lot about comparisons, one size to the other, which one is bigger, which one is smaller, which one's cheaper, which one's more expensive, etc. But I have said in the past that aesthetics and an emotional connection are definitely a reason to buy a car. For instance, in our recent video of the Mazda 6, it doesn't really beat some of the competitors in most of those pragmatic metrics, but it is a very, very beautiful car in my opinion, and that's enough reason for me to actually buy one. The Golf R is very much like that in a way. I do like the aesthetics on the outside. It's a lot less boy racer than some of the competition, but I also really like the way this drives. It has a feel that really speaks to me. I love the way that everything is tuned overall. The Germanic feel of it feels very much like an Audi A3. It's not quite as crazy, not quite as much fun as a Type R, but I think it is very, very well rounded. This feels much more premium than, for instance, a Ford Focus ST, and it feels a lot less raw than a WRX in that top-end RA trim. And even though this is not as fast as a Type R, I appreciate the fact that this has all-wheel drive, because I do like the way that all-wheel drive dynamics feel out on the road. Unquestionably, having just the front wheels powered in that Honda is a hoot and a half because of how much power you're putting just through 2 wheels. But when it comes to applying that performance, especially in adverse weather, the Golf R is going to be my choice. In terms of overall cabin noise, this is also a little bit quieter than some of the competition. We scored 71 decibels at 50 miles an hour in this cabin, and that is a little bit quieter than something like the Honda Civic Type R in our preliminary tests. Now, we haven't had the Type R yet on the usual test road that we test this on, so I will hold final judgment until we can get our hands on one. But this does appear to be more civilized than, for instance, the Ford Focus or the WRX. When it comes to fuel economy, obviously your driving style will have the biggest impact on what numbers you're going to get. And that's why over our week of mixed driving, I have been averaging about 18 miles per gallon in this vehicle. That is notably below the EPA score. However, we have been driving this pretty hard. I suspect that most of the competition is going to be very, very similar to this in terms of overall fuel economy, although the Civic Type R does have the possibility of being more efficient because it does not have an all-wheel drive system, and that does typically lower fuel economy. With all that out of the way, let's talk about how much the Golf R costs. Pricing is a noticeable jump above the GTI for 2018, but it's actually pretty simple to explain because there are really only two ways you can buy your Golf R, with the manual transmission or with the automatic. Aside from that automatic transmission, everything that you've seen in this video is standard on the Golf R. The all-wheel drive system, the navigation system, the LCD instrument cluster, leather upholstery, etc. That's basically the same sort of thing that we see in most of the competition as well. For instance, the Honda Civic Type R is a monospec vehicle. It comes exactly as you see it in videos. While we're talking about the Honda Civic Type R, let's just dive right into that model as our first comparison. The Civic Type R is less expensive as far as MSRP goes at $34,700, but it seems like you're more likely to find the Golf R at or around MSRP than you will the Honda Civic Type R. The Honda Civic Type R has been selling extremely well. Honda really hasn't decided to put more production capacity behind that model, so actual transaction prices do still seem to be fairly high. Of course, it really depends on where you live in the country, because some of you, I've been told, have been getting the Type R for MSRP. So it is possible, but on average, it may be a little bit above. That said, it is still going to be less expensive no matter how you slice it than the Golf R, it seems. That said, of course, unless you can find the Golf R at a really good deal at your dealer, you're still likely to get a very good price on the Type R. It may still be less expensive than the Volkswagen. The Type R is an absolutely incredible performance vehicle. It is an awful lot of fun, it handles extremely well, the acceleration is definitely excellent, and Honda has done a lot of work to make the Type R feel like a performance vehicle in this segment, even though it doesn't have all-wheel drive like its more natural competitors, like the Golf R, the WRX STI, etc. That's no small feat, of course, because we don't really find any torque steer in the Type R, which is incredible. Turbo lag is a lot less pronounced than what we see in both the Golf and the Subaru WRX. And in just about every way, the Honda Civic Type R excels over the competition. On the downside, the aesthetics are my big complaint about the Type R. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comments section below. I've always thought that the Civic hatchback looked a little bit unusual, but the bits that have been added to it to make it the Type R really aren't my cup of tea, especially if you get a white model with all those black parts attached to it. If I were to shop for a Type R, I think it would have to be the black one or the blue one because it helps hide some of those parts a little bit more. I realize it's sacrilege, but the other complaint, as I said before with the Type R in my head, is that no automatic transmission is available. And I'm not talking about a traditional automatic. I think that would be a poor choice for that vehicle, but a dual clutch transmission like we see in the Volkswagen, I think would be a good pairing to the engine that we see in the Type R. If Honda could find some way to get their 8-speed DCT out of one of their other vehicles, improve it to be able to handle the kind of power we see in the Type R and jammed it under the hood, that could be an awful lot of fun. It would also improve not only the sales ability of the vehicle to be able to be purchased by people who just don't want a manual transmission, but it would make it a little bit more suitable for daily driving. Next up we have the Ford Focus, but the big thing to know about the Focus is that the RS, which is theoretically the direct competitor to the Golf R and the Honda Civic Type R, has actually stopped production. It stopped in April 2018. We apparently will get a new Focus ST for 2019, but it's not going to be the same thing as the rest of the entries in this particular end of the segment. It'll be about 250 horsepower, but it's really going to be targeted more at the GTI and the Subaru WRX, not the WRX STI, and perhaps something like a Honda Civic Si. There are some rumblings about the RS returning, but it may not happen until 2020, and we really don't know what that vehicle will be like. There have been some rumors saying it would be a hybrid or some other form of electrification, and some rumors have said that it may be a 400 horsepower 2.3-liter turbocharged engine. We just really don't know at this point, as it is going to be about 2 years away. That means that with the Ford out of the way, the only other real direct competitor here is the Subaru WRX STI, and I would say just the limited version because it's going to be the most like the Golf R overall. At $41,395, it actually manages to be more expensive than the most expensive version of the Volkswagen. We get a little bit more power, but interestingly enough, we don't actually get that much better performance out of that model. We also don't find adaptive dampers. Turbo lag is definitely more pronounced than we find in the Golf R, and certainly more pronounced than what we find in the Honda Civic Type R. The result is that initial acceleration feels a little bit more muted, and then power really builds as the engine gets going. The overall feeling of the WRX STI is definitely more raw, a little bit more visceral, and a little bit different than some of the competition. I think this hot hatch category is the perfect case of the split between what I think is best and what I think is best for me if I was shopping in this category. Because I think hands down the Honda Civic Type R is more fun than the Golf R. I also think the STI is actually perhaps a little bit more fun just because of the overall nature of that vehicle as well. The STI has that rawness again that we don't see in the Volkswagen or the Honda even. The turbo lag is hilarious, the steering is heavy, but it's not actually faster than the Golf. The Honda, on the other hand, is just absolutely incredible. It's less expensive than the other alternatives in this segment. It is surprisingly fast, even though it is front-wheel drive. We don't really have much torque steer in that vehicle, and the handling is absolutely incredible. But the big thing about the Type R is how easy it is to drive fast. For instance, last year I had the ability to drive the Type R back-to-back with a wide variety of considerably more expensive and more capable performance vehicles. And when I started looking at the data that we data logged from our GPS accelerometers, I was actually driving the Honda Civic Type R harder and faster than some of those other vehicles out there, even though it really is less capable overall, because the capability of the Type R is just so accessible. It is so easy to drive. But as I said at the beginning of this video, if I were shopping in this segment, I would get the Golf R. Some of that has to do with aesthetics. I like the way the Golf R looks, both inside and outside. It's a little bit more mature, it's a little bit more restrained than what we see in the Honda. Some of this also has to do with all-wheel drive availability. We have all-wheel drive in the Golf R, we don't have it in the Honda. And in my area of the country, especially in the winter when you're going up and over steep passes, gravel roads, etc., the all-wheel drive system is a little bit more practical. I also just like the overall driving dynamics of all-wheel drive. And lastly, again, I know it's horrible to say, but I do like the fact that you can get that dual clutch transmission in the Golf R. It's going to be faster 0 to 60, it's going to be more efficient, it's going to be more livable for the average person. But I would say that it would depend on whether you're looking at the vehicle as an everyday vehicle that you can have fun with on the weekend, or whether it's a weekend car. If you're buying the car just for weekend fun, then I would say get the Honda Civic Type R, and that's what I would do. If I was shopping simply for a weekend vehicle, Type R every day. Manual transmission, not a problem for a weekend vehicle, it is an absolute hoot. But that's theoretically not the driving mission behind some of these hot hatchbacks. The entire reason for buying a vehicle like the Type R, like the Golf R, etc., is that these are affordable, practical vehicles that you can drive every day. This is the vehicle you can have as your only car, you can have a lot of fun with it, it's practical, etc. Because daily driving livability is a core value in this segment, the Golf R has to be my top pick. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comments section below. Especially let me know what you think about the Type R versus the Golf R for a weekend vehicle versus an everyday vehicle, and how that would affect your shopping in this particular segment. As always, if you haven't done so, click that subscribe button down there. That helps us get access to vehicles like the Golf R. Subscribers are very, very important to this channel. If you want to support us, you can click up to the top, head over to Patreon, and support this channel on a monthly basis. You can also click the related videos that you'll see just above my head or so. Thanks for checking out this video, and I will see you next week.